Over the past years, humans have been using up water faster than we can restore it. We spill chemicals into the rivers, not realizing what effects it has on the world. Rafters and kayakers lose water quality, and civilians lose usable water.
What makes us human? What brought us together? What gave us our identity? What brought us to where we at? Never would have happened without rivers. We became civilized by rivers. We started agriculture by rivers. The whole idea of economics is based on rivers.
And this is leading to a larger and better society. However, we're not thinking about what the natural world needs. If the water returned to us, we could restore the river. However, it's not. It's flowing downstream and evaporating, or being used for farmland and other human benefits.
We have an area that has pristine flow, headwater flows that flow from the north primarily to the south, tributary to the San Juan River in New Mexico. And of course we're just at the early start of runoff. There has been some early snowmelt that has run off, so generally a pretty healthy river system. There are areas that there are some water quality concerns. I'm sure one of them that has come up and will continue to come up over a period of time is the state of the Animas and the Gold King spill.
There's that entire discussion. We would not be here. We wouldn't be speaking words at each other. And not to say that that's what makes us advanced. That's a great question, and it's something that just lives in my heart. I love rivers because that's who I am. That's who we are as a people. If we look at what is it about Colorado that we like? The outdoor lifestyle. We like living in mountain towns. All these things that we like. Rivers give us our identity. It ties us into our place in this world. For me, it's a center of my universe and understanding who I am and what matters.
Every person uses water. Rather it be in a residential or industrial setting, we all use it. The average shower takes 17.2 gallons for 8 minutes and 12 seconds of water running. But that isn't all that much in conservation compared to farming. It takes 2,500 gallons to make 1 bushel of corn and 441 gallons to get 1 pound of steak. So next time think about the water before your barbecue. The world depends on water, but we all play a part in watersheds. The more water used upstream equals less water going to the ocean. The largest user of water is agriculture. The second is power generating. It is estimated in January 2011 report by Civil Society Institute, Benefits of Beyond BAU, Human, Social, and Environmental Damages Avoided Through the Retirement of U.S. Coal Fleet, that the number of gallons drawn per day for nuclear and coal power plants is 200 billion gallons. An acre foot is 325,851. They use 61,377,746.2705 acre feet a day, but around 1,922.75 million was given to the lower basin and the same was given to the upper. Later we decided to give Mexico 1.5. Looking back, there is a lot of water to use in the rivers, yet there is a lot of people who need water to survive. Every person is made up of 70% water. There is a little wiggle room, but it is needed. Hydro water throw is used by damming water up in a river and then using its pressure to turn turbines, but that water is returned to the river. It is nuclear power that makes the water unused, idle, and the radiation from the nuclear atoms radiates the water, making it unusable for consumption or recreational use.
Rivers are so much as just a recreational experience. I mean, this is something we pass down to our children. We share with our friends. we build skills with, we bond to each other and we bond to our places? It's a great question, and you're never going to find a universal answer to that.
Basically, what are the costs associated with a solar installation? Solar installation is based on a few different things, but the first and primary thing is how many kilowatt hours a person or a business is using. So typically we look at an electric bill and we can calculate pretty quickly the average kilowatt hours used in a year. From that we can figure out how many panels it's going to take to equal that amount of kilowatts. Typically the panels that we use are between 250 to 300 watts each, and they typically gain about 5 watts per year in the manufacturing process. So a few years ago we were using 225 watt panels. So the cost of panels and their efficiencies have been, the costs have been going down, the efficiencies have been going up. And panels are one of the largest parts of the solar installation. You also have inverters and racking, wire, conduit, breakers, permits, and labor. Those are the main things that go into a solar install.
When we talk about solar energy, one of the most important things is to talk about solar energy efficiency. And when we look at the efficiency of a solar energy panel, what we really mean is the cost per kilowatt hours. If you look at solar energy over the last 20 years, what you've seen is a systematic decline of the cost of a kilowatt hour as produced by solar energy. And what you've seen over the last 20 years of the cost of a kilowatt hour as produced by oil and gas is a systematic increase. And so if you think about one line is coming down and one line is going up, at a certain point those two lines meet, and that's called energy parity. When that happens, that means that a consumer can buy energy from either oil and gas or from solar at the same price.
Solar panel works, a solar panel is made up of cells. The cells are made of silicon, which is basically sand that's processed. When you build a silicon cell, they are sensitive to light. When a photon of light hits a solar cell, it releases an electron. Those electrons are released and they're combined as you have a lot of cells put together. It's an additive system. So when you put all those cells together, it outputs a panel. A panel is between 250 and 300 watts. And you collect those watts of energy from each panel and run that through an inverter. The electricity that comes out of a solar panel is direct current. The direct current needs to be inverted through an inverter into household AC current in a typical installation. So after it goes through an inverter and turns it to AC current, you backfeed a breaker just like any other breaker in your house, except this breaker accepts the power going back through it. That power feeds the loads in your house first, and then anything extra goes back to the utility and spins your meter backwards.
All right, I'm Laurie Dixon. I'm the program director at 4CORE, which stands for Four Corners Office of Resource Efficiency, located here in Durango. we actually have several programs right now that we're working on. One, and the most current one is it is an EPA grant that we received for getting solar on low-income and affordable housing. So we're working with a couple of different organizations, including Southwest Horizons Ranch and Habitat for Humanity of La Plata County, to get solar on these homes and try and reduce energy bills for low-income families. We've completed 101 solar installations in Durango and La Plata County, and are working on doing the same program in Archuleta. Yes, definitely. Is there a way you can get involved? Well, this next project that we're going to be working on coming in this spring and summer, and we anticipate the Southwest Horizons Ranch solar project will be installed sometime this summer, is we'd love some volunteer help. Like to get you out there in the field and show you what it takes to get up some solar panels. This is a little different project. They're not individual solar panels on each of the homes. However, we will have one home in the Habitat for Humanity project in Bayfield that solar will be installed on the house. The Southwest Horizons Ranch project is one that actually is going to provide the electricity for pumping water. And believe it or not, that's a huge expense that goes into the electric bills of the collective houses at the Southwest Horizon Ranch. So it's a little bit different project from an engineering standpoint, but it's one certainly where we can use some help and some volunteer labor. So if you'd like to do that, we'd love to have you out there.
The presence of dust in the snowpack causes the snow to melt at an accelerated rate. This means the snow is gone from the mountains earlier in the year. Dust from Utah and Arizona is picked up by the wind and carried to its destination in the Rocky Mountains. Soil destabilization is what causes dust to be picked up by the wind. Once the dust is airborne, it is blown until it hits the mountains and is deposited in the snowpack. As soon as the dust is in the snowpack, it begins to absorb and transmit solar radiation. Albedo is the amount of radiation that a substance reflects. Snow that has a significant layer of dust has a much lower albedo than snow without dust. This means the rate of snowmelt is increased.
What I do is run a nonprofit called Center for Snow and Avalanche Studies. I'm essentially the only employee. And so my time is spent, a lot of my time is spent fundraising, doing general administrative work, and then maintaining our met stations in our study basin. Some years it has been modeled by researchers that, the snow left the mountains 50 days earlier than it normally would have. Other years it was modeled where snow left the mountains 30 days, a month earlier.
Soil destabilization is primarily caused by the overgrazing of cattle and the use of recreational vehicles.
the date that the snow's all gone off the grounds in the mountains here would be pushed up to, you know, earlier. It could be March. It could be.
These graphs represent the snow water equivalent for the San Juan Mountains. They show the spring runoff has been happening earlier than the historical average, which is shown in red.
Well, it's important to understand is that our business isn't driven completely by high water. Sometimes high water doesn't drive our business. The ideal flows are medium water. And anything that does not push that window of medium water into the prime season of tourism so that the two come in a line hurts our revenue stream. So if the water's too high or too low during prime tourism season when school's out, mid-June through early August, that hurts our revenue. So an earlier runoff from a heavy dusting can see us dropping into lower flows that are less than ideal later in the season.
As a skier, dust on snow has a pretty significant impact on spring skiing and into the summer. Oftentimes it can make beautiful high mountain runs unskiable. As you're cruising along, you'll go from a fresh patch to a dust patch, and depending on what wax you're using on your skis, you'll kind of come to a stop. So it does pose some pretty significant challenges when you're doing some ski mountaineering in May and June into July.
To solve this issue, people in both desert and mountain regions will have to use communication to collaborate on solutions that can be presented to local government officials to create change. There are many actions that can be taken to prevent this issue. The biggest skill that needs to be used is communication.
So people need to, contact their legislators and lawmakers and encourage them to support long-term land management practices that are healthy for the soil and stabilize the soil.
Another way you can contribute is to support the Bears Ears Coalition in designating a large portion of Utah a national park. This would prevent further development of the area as well as limit the use of off-road and recreational vehicles.
Durango, a town that has so many things to do and love. A town that has so many health-conscious people who put the well-being of the environment and their bodies first. We have so many local restaurants and stores that provide food that has been grown, raised, and produced in the La Plata area. But even in such a health-conscious town, there are still so many food options that are detrimental to the health of ourselves and the environment. McDonald's, Dairy Queen, Taco Bell, and even restaurants like Applebee's can be some of our favorite go-to dining spots, but are also some of the least environmentally friendly. The main reason for this is because of factory farms.
We try to use as much local stuff as possible, and even when we're not using local stuff, we're trying to find the closest regional source.
Factory farms are places where cows, chickens, pigs, and other animals are raised to produce meat, dairy, or other products like leather. These farms are focused on profit, not quality, not the health of the animals, and definitely not the environment. Manure from these farms is most often dumped into lagoons or taken away by waste management. Farmers are also taking the mass amounts of manure and applying them to the land surrounding the farm. But because of the quantity, the manure cannot efficiently soak into the soil, and it ends up putting off harmful greenhouse gases rather than being used as fertilizer. A better alternative would be to send this waste to a treatment plant, but because of the profit-based mindset of factory farmers, they prefer instead to dump it nearby. Another greenhouse gas-related issue is the transportation of food. There are about 20,000 factory farms in the United States. And according to the Colorado Restaurant Association, there are over 10,000 restaurants in Colorado alone. If we estimate that every state has 10,000 restaurants, that means there are roughly 500,000 restaurants in the U.S. If we say that 80% of those restaurants are supplied by factory farms, then that means the ratio of farms to restaurants are 20 to 1. That means one factory farm is supplying about 20 different restaurants or more, which means a lot of driving. And, of course, there are not 20 restaurants and one factory farm. There are 20,000 farms, all driving long distances to get to their clients.
It takes everything that's natural out of the system because you're taking animals out of their natural environment and feeding them food that is not what they're naturally supposed to eat, which then creates problems with both the health of the animals and the health of the land that surrounds the confinement operation. And it's pretty much a lose-lose for everyone unless you're interested only in the bottom line, and even that is starting to break down because really it's not a system that can work long term. It's not sustainable.
Use local products and local meats. It always has better flavor, it's fresher. You know, when you get it commercially, who knows, you know, where it came from, how long it took to get there, so it's much better when it's nice and fresh and delicious.
We feed them what nature intended them to eat. Isn't that right? Yeah, you get grass. Iris here only gets grass because that's what cows are meant to eat. Cows are not meant to digest corn or soy or animal byproducts. They're vegetarians and they're ruminants. They have a rumen that's specifically designed to break down, yes, hello. It's specifically designed to break this down into protein. It's an amazing system. And when you monkey with that system by feeding them something that they are not meant to eat, like corn, it causes all sorts of problems, and that's when we get into all the chronic antibiotic use and the use of pesticides and fertilizers and all these things that really aren't necessary in a holistic system.
I love it. I appreciate making as small a carbon footprint as possible, and whenever possible, I like to use local ingredients.
I think the main reason is quality. I would like to have this grand answer for you that I really wanted the whole local food system to be this thing that helps the local economy and helps everybody in a certain way, and it does, but really the quality is just uncomparable. I mean, I can't get this kind of food off a truck. I have to get it from a local farmer.
A feasible way to provide more local food and less factory farmed food would be to have more farms and gardens in the area, and to use their products in our local stores and restaurants, or even in our own kitchens. But worldwide, abolishing all food corporations would be an enormous task to accomplish. So many big corporations are based off food, and would be extremely hard to take down. McDonald's makes over $24 billion a year. Completely erasing this company and other companies like it would change the whole economy. Not only that, but people would have to learn to stop being consumers that don't care about what they put into their body. But, since changing millions of people's way of life is such a complex task, we will have to stick with changing the world one person at a time. All we need to do is emphasize the local farms and restaurants already existing in the area, and educate people on the benefits of eating local, which include the health of themselves and the environment, boosting the local economy, and knowing that every bite of food they take is ethical. The first step is to change the way we think about food. Start thinking about the lives that are behind the pound of beef at the grocery store, or the pesticides in the bag of apples that you grabbed without a second thought. Luckily, here in Durango, we already have a model society when it comes to local eating. In such a beautiful and farm-friendly place, we already have a very healthy culture that includes a great emphasis on good food. Compared to many other cities in the United States, we are very lucky to have the opportunity to be such a healthy, thriving town. But those other cities have infiltrated our haven with their fast food chains and the general desire as Americans to not think before we consume. As a common tourist location, we're not just feeding our citizens, but also the rest of the world. And maybe through this connection, we can leave a mark on other cities, rather than them leaving a mark on us. We have the resources to provide our town with local food and cut out the factory farm food. We have a plethora of healthier options that you can explore, like James Ranch, Zia Taqueria, Grassburger, and many, many more.
We all use energy in our everyday lives, I guarantee it. Whether it's turning on the lights, turning up the heat, charging our phones, computers, etc. What we don't do is pay attention to how energy is made and distributed, how much energy we use on a daily basis, how the amount of energy we use affects our surroundings, and how to reduce that amount.
The average American annual energy consumption is made up of 26% lighting and appliances, 8% air conditioning, 20% water heating, 5% refrigeration, and 41% space heating.
So what do I think uses the most energy in our school? Yes, electricity is energy, but I think also like we have heat, we have air conditioning. Looking at that in general, air conditioning and heating, definitely. Have I had any struggles with energy at the school? I think the big one is everyone turning their lights off at night, because even though it's not a ton, that adds up over the course of the year. Also trying to figure out the thermostat, because everyone thinks, all right, if I turn it down at night and then turn it back up during the day, then that's going to save energy. But I also know, like they say, just keep it out of constant, otherwise it's not working as much. So I think that's one of the big struggles, is just figuring out what is the most energy efficient way we can do what we're doing right now.
The US uses about 5 times more energy per capita than the worldwide per capita energy consumption.
A single American's energy use annually is 11,040 kilowatt hours of electricity at home alone. That would be equivalent to drying your hair 165,600 times a year, which is equivalent to 454 times a day. This affects our environment because almost every type of electricity generates waste. Whether it's releasing carbon dioxide or nitrogen oxide, which leads to air pollution and smog. Energy sources, such as nuclear energy, put off dangerous solid wastes, like radioactive wastes, which remain radioactive for thousands of years. This waste can cause cancer and genetic mutations in humans and animals. Of course, this also affects global warming on a large scale.
Hi, I'm Laurie Dixon. I'm the program director at 4CORE, which is Four Corners Office of Resource Efficiency. Improving energy efficiency comes in a number of different ways. It can be caulking windows. It can be turning all your lights off when you're not at home. It can be changing all your light bulbs to LEDs. So there are a number of very simple, cost-effective ways that you can reduce your energy consumption. Changing light bulbs is probably the easiest, quickest, simplest thing, and LED lights are the way to go. They last much longer. Your return on investment is just a few years, and you save so much energy.
You can't pay me any color and I can be a clown, but you ain't got my number. Yeah, you can't pin me down. Yeah, you can't pin me down. Yeah, you can't pin me down. Now I got your back up. What do you not like? Do you think I'm stuck up? Cause I'm always picking fights. You might think I'm one thing, but I am another. You can call my bluff. Time to back up, motherfucker. Do you really want me to write a feminist anthem? I'm happy cooking dinner in the kitchen for my husband. You can pay me any color and I can be a clown, but you ain't got my number. No, you can't pin me down. Yeah, you can't pin me down. Yeah, you can't.
So high in the Continental Divide between Pagosa and South Fork is Wolf Creek Pass. It is at over 10,000 feet elevation, and it's in the middle of critical migration corridor between two wilderness areas. It's critical lynx habitat. There are rare fen wetlands there. It's a really special place. Right now there's a very small ski operation there, and a developer named Red McCombs has planned a 8,000 person village at the base of that ski area. So essentially it's a massive real estate and retail space development on the top of Wolf Creek Pass. And there are some folks who will say that there's an economic benefit to the region if we develop this ski area. I think from our perspective, that claim is dubious insofar as we may create economic activity, more economic activity on top of Wolf Creek Pass, but it might be at the expense of surrounding communities. To date, Pagosa and South Fork have spent a lot of money to build out lodging and restaurants and essentially infrastructure to support folks who ski at Wolf Creek Ski Area. If we create a self-contained village at the top of Wolf Creek Pass, we may be creating economic activity there at the expense of surrounding communities.
The wintertime I'm there a couple times a month. I spend a lot of time skiing the backcountry, and then on the days the resort does get a lot of snow. Typically try and sneak over there for ski days then. I think we'd see a large increase in traffic over there. With development, we'd see a lot more people on the ski slopes, a lot more people on the roads. With that, you'd probably also start to see more people in the surrounding backcountry, which could be good, could not be good at the same time. I would just not like to see a small family-operated resort be taken over and turned into another circus show, kind of like Summit County, Vail Resorts, things like that. It's kind of nice that it's low-key and mellow over there.
lot of different animals would have an impact. Some of the animals would include the fish, who would be deprived of water to live in. And then also a major impact on species, the Canadian lynx. The Canadian lynx uses the area around Wolf Creek to live. It moves around the area quite a bit from south to north. The South San Juan Wilderness and the San Juan National Forest and the Rio Grande National Forest are very important lynx habitat. So the lynx would be impacted not just by the development itself up at the top of the mountain, but by the traffic coming in both directions. The Forest Service and the United States Fish and Wildlife Service have both confirmed that lynx will be killed by the additional traffic that would be generated going to and from the village if it were to be developed. So there's no doubt in anyone's mind, it's documented, that Wolf Creek Village kills lynx. And the question is whether or not it goes forward based on those impacts. Those are all issues that are being fought out right now.
And there's two things that come to mind. One is, unfortunately, this is not something that a lot of people can do, but there's a big legal case going on right now that is going to have a very large role in determining what happens up there. The Forest Service approved a land swap that essentially greenlights the development, and organizations like San Juan Citizens Alliance, Rocky Mountain Wild, the San Luis Valley Ecosystem Council have filed a federal lawsuit to overturn that decision. So unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, a lot hinges on the outcome of that court case. In addition, though, it's important for folks to always be letting their elected representatives know that Wolf Creek is an area that's important to them. They want to see it protected and they want to see it preserved. Because regardless of what happens in the courts, what happens politically always has a bearing on a potential project. So continuing to communicate with elected officials to make that perspective heard and heard loudly is something that we can all be doing and we should all be doing right now.
In the Wild Free Roaming Horses and Burros Act, Wild Free-Roaming Horses and Burros Act, it's been written 50,000 ways, but that's the actual name of the act. It came into being in 1971. It basically said that where wild horses are found on the landscape, they will be managed there. Now, since 1971, herd areas, herd management areas, wild horse ranges, many of those herd areas have been zeroed out. And what that means is, say there was a group of 40 horses there, BLM rounded all of them up and removed all of them. BLM found a group of wild horses in Spring Creek Basin. There were also 2 other herds around here. In about the early to mid 80s, the public basically came to BLM and said, we want you to close 2 of these herd areas and have horses just in Spring Creek Basin. So that became Spring Creek Basin Herd Management Area. A management plan was written, so that's called a Herd Management Area Plan, an HMAP. And within that designates Spring Creek Basin as a place where wild horses can be managed.
Most of the horses you see here were either born or have been captured and sold, have been bought back and are now living freely on the range.
Individual horses react to capture differently. They react to adoption differently. They react to domesticity differently. BLM likes to offer younger horses for adoption. The public likes to adopt younger horses because they're more trainable, they're more tractable, they're more adaptable. They're easier to, they haven't been in the wild so long that they're just totally wild and living that way. Capture, it can be physically difficult on them because they are being, traditionally, with using the helicopters, they are run, they are chased. Most BLM herd management areas are in very rough country, so there's a lot of rocks, there's cliffs, there's fall-offs, there's arroyos. Most herd management areas are fairly large, so depending on how far away the horses are from whatever trap site that's set up, the horses have to run that distance to get there. Some helicopter pilots are really good. They just kind of ease the horses along, so to speak. Some horses seem to get through it. It doesn't affect them too awful much, especially if they're younger, and they can kind of bounce back from that. I will tell you, helicopters that go over this area, over the ranch, over the basin, now the horses that have been rounded up, they'll run. They know that sound, and they know the trauma associated with it. And I don't think trauma is too hard a word. ATVs, horses, the Mustangs don't like the ATVs either. They're kind of used to it on the sanctuary now because I use the ATV sometimes, especially when it's muddy, when it's rained, to get out on the ranch to check them, but they don't like it. They'll hear it, and a lot of times they'll be running before I crest a rise to even have seen them. It can affect them hugely, being captured, especially by the helicopter. We have not done bait trapping here yet. I don't have any experience. We're hoping, based on friends I have who have done it. PZP, that's the fertility control vaccine. That helps protect them by keeping them, there's kind of a phrase that's become very popular in the last few years, and it's called keep the wild horses wild. And what that means is managing them on their home ranges, managing them in the wild instead of using as a management tool roundup and removal. So PZP is part of keeping them wild on the range because it addresses the reproduction, kind of the front side of that issue, as opposed to, oh my gosh, now we're overpopulated. Requires BLM to manage a herd of horses in there. Issues we do have by educating people about what goes on here. People who grew up in the West, you understand about water scarcity, that it's a limited resource. It's a challenge to educate people and let them know what's really going on and how to best manage these horses, because you can't just leave them alone.
Answer is we don't know how the metals are affecting the fish themselves, because those metals accumulate in the organs of the fish. What we don't really know is sort of the chronic effects over time of how these metals could affect. Right, so if you were to eat one of the fish, you would not be affected by things like cadmium, zinc. Those are some of the metals you hear talked about. They accumulate those in their kidneys, in their liver, and gill are just things that you don't necessarily eat, but wildlife does eat those. So it's a potential concern for wildlife. As far as threats to the fish in the river, one of the things you have to think about is habitat in general. So if you think about the acid mine drainage coming out of the Silverton area, that's affected by the amount of water coming down the stream channel. If there's not a lot of water coming down during drought periods, you have relatively high concentrations of metals. It can affect the macroinvertebrates, or the food chain, in the aquatic environment, the heavy metal drainage. Certainly, if you get above Durango in the Animas River Canyon, then you really are talking about the trout populations up there suffering and dying from the heavy metal pollution. The Animas River Canyon's 20, 30 miles long, about 20 miles long actually. It has very low densities of fish and virtually no fish by the time you get up to Silverton. So those are directly affected by the dissolved metals in the Animas River. And it'll affect the fish populations a couple of different ways. You'll find primarily brook trout up there because they're the most metal tolerant of all the trout species. And so you'll see a lack of diversity in trout as well as the abundance of fish.
What kind of fish does the metal affect the most?
Rainbow trout, cutthroat trout. Probably cutthroats are the most sensitive.
Metals, in the Animas River where I fish, which is mostly, going to be from about Tremble Lane, down south all the way to the state line. Don't fish much on the Animas up around Silverton because, the fishery is definitely impacted. Each fishery will maybe have its own character, so on the Animas, what we expect to find are a pretty good mix of rainbow and brown trout. Whereas if you were to go up to Cascade Creek, a tributary of the Animas, you're probably going to find almost exclusively brook trout. And
everyone I come across in cages they bought, they think of me and my wandering, but I'm never.
Some of the things, when we think of protecting the rivers, oftentimes what we're talking about is protecting the entire landscape, because we live in watersheds, and what happens on the land, as well as what happens in the river specifically, all end up affecting water quality. I think that's a critical law that needs to be fixed to really address the problems from legacy mines and legacy acid mine drainage issues. It's not so much in this region. What 1872 mining law does is it regulates new mining. And we're not seeing a lot of new mining here. So you might say, well, how does that help us here in Durango? But one of the key reforms that's proposed for the 1872 mining law is to look at a funding mechanism. Right now there's no royalties paid. There's no money that goes from the mining of hard rock back to the federal government. So what that means is there's no money for mining cleanup. And so if we can reform the 1872 mining law, and if one of those reforms deals with royalty and reclamation fees, we would finally start putting money away that could then be used to clean up historic mining sites. I think that there will be other opportunities for the public to lend their voice to political processes, whether it be 1872 mining law reform or Good Samaritan reform. And so staying in touch with some type of an organization that's tracking those issues so that people know when they can lend their voice of support, if there's a critical juncture or a milestone where that support is needed, I think is a really great way to stay engaged and to help with some of the political solutions that are necessary to address this long-term problem.
if people are compassionate, it's gonna have an impact on the community when there's a lot of stray dogs. For instance, here in La Plata County, you don't see very many stray dogs. Even out in the rural areas of our county, for the most part, dogs are kept indoors, and or behind a fence. And when you see one loose, a lot of people like to let their dogs just run loose. They're going to get picked up. The people in this county are compassionate. They're going to be worried that, especially if they don't have tags on, that these dogs are lost or going to get hit by a car.
Yeah.
So I feel like there is some emotional impact there on the community, because they take good care of their dog, and they don't want to see someone else's dog running around. We had an incident yesterday where, actually the night before last, where 2 dogs were found running at large, and nice dogs, and the person called animal protection, and the officer went out and picked them up and brought them here. The owner showed up yesterday to pick them up, and he was very angry. He was very angry that someone picked up his dogs. He said, well, why aren't my dogs allowed to run wherever they want on my property? Well, because they leave your property. And it's technically, if you're not home and they're outside loose, they're at large then, if you're not there to have them under voice command. And then I think the impacts on the community, as far as like on the Navajo reservation, I think it's hard. A lot of places that we here in Durango go to, driving to Phoenix or California or anywhere, the Grand Canyon, stuff like that. We see all those dogs loose on the reservation and starving, and they hang out in front of fast food restaurants and things like that, trying to get a handout. And I think that impacts our community a lot. I think seeing that is really hard. A lot of tourists drive through there. They come to Durango to ride the train, or they're going to Mesa Verde, and they came from California or somewhere. They'll pick up those dogs and bring them to us, because they're not used to seeing that in most of the cities in the United States.
Yeah.
So when they drive through an area like that and they see the impact that has, that these animals are abandoned and starving, it can be very emotional.
Sustainable building is important because building homes and commercial projects is one of the largest impacts we have on the overall status of our planet. So therefore, the more efficient and the smarter you can build, then the more sustainable for future generations it is. There's a lot of different meanings of green or sustainable. For a lot of people, it's a marketing tool. For us, it's I don't know, it's really just something we believe in. My dad started building super insulated houses in Alaska back in the 70s. And then when it came to kind of green building, that interested me just because, you know, I care about the comfort and the durability and the, you know, just kind of the overall environmental impact that houses have on the land.
Tiny homes, by their small nature, are more environmentally friendly than larger homes. You know, there's obviously a lot less materials that goes into making them, a lot less resources. And then also they're small, they don't take a whole lot of energy to heat or cool. And then less lights, it's just less of everything. So they're definitely more environmentally friendly.
Part of the vision of Twin Buttes is not just to build houses and not just to build a neighborhood, but it's to build a community and to build what we call a sustainable community. I think sustainability is about health, and it's about everybody's health. So I think it's about the health of me, the person that's going to live in the home. I think it's about the health of the people that build the homes and minimizing or eliminating their exposure to toxic materials. I think it's about the health of the environment. You do as little harm to your environment, to the natural environment, as you can while you're introducing human beings into that environment. So it's not that you can do no harm, but you minimize the harm.
Commercial and residential homes have a huge impact on just our energy resources. So what we're trying to do is it's our job to provide, you know, suggestions to clients as far as what products we can put into a house that are as comfortable as possible and renewable. So.
I wish more people would ask more questions about the toxic components that go into the building trade. Because really the whole sustainability movement and the environmental movement and the ecological movement and the energy efficiency movement don't ask those questions. They don't ask the question or set any standards in terms of the materials and the underlying toxicity in the materials.
So when we're building tiny houses, you know, ultimately the customer gets to decide on what materials and finishes go into it. But generally, we try to use water-based, you know, low VOC, no VOC, very low toxic materials. It is a small space, so if you are using if you're using finishes like an oil-based polyurethane, it's pretty, you know, it's going to have a lot of vapor to it, and you're putting it in that small space, it's going to compound the issue. It's going to, you know, a larger house, you'd have all this air volume to air out, and you just don't have that in a tiny house. So it is important, especially in your finishes, to use low toxic.
Back in 1999, I got hairy cell leukemia. And I think that was a direct result of my years in Fairbanks using pressure-treated materials, toxic mastics. That was just the construction trade. So my mindset changed dramatically after that. And as a result, you know, I started to think about just what the impact was on, you know, 120 crew members, subcontractors to be in that house, and they're on the front end of that toxic material. And I worried about their health. I worried about the client's health. So it's kind of a big picture, you know, so that's just one aspect of how we go about building.
Our state and local, and in some cases federal governments, have outlawed, you know, blatantly toxic building materials. But there's still so much out there that is completely legal, and yet I wouldn't want it in my home.
So to me, what it means to be sustainable is, for one, is just marrying the house to the site. So taking some time, not just coming through and bulldozing trees, but really taking, you know, months and different seasons to be able to look at a site and see how a house should sit on it.
We would like for every home to maximize the passive solar gain, and that's just making sure you have a lot of windows facing south, and that you have walls that collect the heat as the sun comes into those windows. So you know, that doesn't require a lot of extra cost. That just requires advanced planning and good design.
To run a house off, you know, solar panels, you have to find very efficient lighting. You know, all the lights are always LED. You're finding Energy Star appliances, ceiling fans instead of really big air conditioners, things like that. You're doing a lot of little things that add up to more efficiency as a whole.
All the toilets, all the shower heads, everything has to meet very low flow, so therefore you're using much less water, which is important throughout the country, but especially here in the Southwest.
You look at it at this house and it looks like a typical beautiful Durango home, but it's what's behind the walls, the roof, and the floors. And so, you know, what we do that's unusual is that, say, before just pouring a concrete slab, we put 4 inches of foam under it. We started building 12-inch walls, super insulated roofs, and then the windows, triple pane windows. Very few builders use triple pane windows. So you're trying to create a buffer or down jacket on a house. I think the bottom line is that the house costs little to run. It's just amazing comfortable. And also just the quality of life inside the house is just non-toxic. So it's a big deal to us.
Also, just the overall footprint environmentally that a house has. You know, there's a lot of different building products that go into a home, and for us, and for me, it just means that having the lowest impact that you can. So between building high performance and energy efficient, you use less fossil fuels, more renewables, so therefore less footprint that way, and then also just trying to use local materials so things come from closer is also important. You know, I think it would be a great thing if more builders were truly certified. You know, the unique thing in Colorado is that we don't have any type of contractor's licensing program. So there's really no way to certify or to verify other than through code officials that a house is being built to a certain standard other than code minimum. For these houses, they have so many different and unique requirements and aspects that I think it's important to be educated, and I think it's valuable because you really start learning once again that a building is a system and the house is a system. So I think it'd be great if more builders were certified and accredited through these different programs, because I think it would just raise the bar and create a better overall construction in the area.
What we need to do to make sure this community gets built the way we want it to get built, to achieve the sustainable vision we want to achieve, is we have to be a regulator. We have to actually, as the developer, act a bit like a government and have tight design and energy standards that we enforce, not just as architects and builders and homeowners come through to get their future home approved, but also as they build their homes to make sure they actually build what they say they're going to build.
I think that the ultimate testament is just when our clients move into these houses, they really didn't fully understand how comfortable the houses were going to be, and then they move in and they send us testimonial letters just going, it's just amazing, and just and they're appreciative of us for trying to explain to them the technical details of how to achieve that. But once they live there, they never look back.
Organic is a term used mostly in food that has been overused actually in the commercial industry to the point that it doesn't really mean anything anymore.
Organic is a word that has been misused through time, but everybody has a sense that it just means from the earth.
That are organic are processed with organic farming guidelines.
Growing up in Durango, Colorado, I've always eaten organic foods. As I've become older, I've become more curious about what I put into my body. I've always thought that the word organic meant without pesticides, but my partner and I decided to find the truth on this topic.
Organic is the absence of pesticides and herbicides, also using permaculture practices, so making sure that the environment even in and around your farm is still thriving. So I think that it's pretty bad when farms are using monoculture, so growing all of the same crop, not taking advantage of growing multiple crops and the benefits that can have. So that's really important. So just using sustainable practices.
Actually have the USDA logo on them, which means the government has actually certified it. So when you see that, that means they've actually gone through a whole certification program with the USDA, Department of Agriculture.
We headed up to James Ranch to talk to sustainable farming experts. James Ranch is a family-owned and operated organic ranch in Durango, Colorado.
And this is the chicken yard for the winter. Normally they're behind us here in the tree farm where they'll spend the summer, but up when it's in the winter and cold, they're in these two aviaries, as well as Van Hilton, which is over here. We'll go see that later. And there's about 300 laying hens that we have full time, and then there's close to 200 baby chicks just behind me here that will be the next wave of laying hens. There's also 20 pigs that are about 2 months old that will also be going out in the field, staying with us here right now. Here at the James Ranch, we are not certified organic, but we also do not use any additives for our either injecting into our animals or into what they eat. Mostly because it's way too expensive to do that, and also because it's much better for the consumer and the animal. And the science of that is super complicated, but in general, if you are following Mother Nature and how she does it, you're going to see that as it's much more effective. So things like cross-species grazing and pasture cropping, where you are vertically integrating a lot of different enterprises into the same area, is super important. And so that's how you get around having to use all those extra chemicals and fertilizers.
My family chooses to farm organic because we've seen what non-organic farming does to the earth. Over the past 50 years, CAFOs, or factory farms, have stripped the land that they're on, especially with monocultures like corn and soy and wheat. It strips the soil, it releases carbon to the atmosphere, basically destroys the ground that it's on. And so the farming that we do, it can be classified in many ways, more than organic, but it improves the land that we're on. It builds topsoil, it is healthy for the animals and the customers that we sell our food to, and us. We choose to farm organic because that's the way it's meant to be done.
It is implied that the consumption of pesticides is harmful to the human body, but how exactly do they affect us? Pesticides have been known to cause multiple types of cancer, including brain, bone, liver, and leukemia. In females, breast and ovarian cancer, and in males, prostate and testicular cancer. According to the National Cancer Institute, cancer is the name given to a collection of related diseases. In all types of cancer, some of the body's cells begin to divide without stopping and spread into surrounding tissues. Pesticides and other chemicals used in the production of our food cause this corruption in the DNA of the cells, which causes the cells to reproduce wrong and become cancerous. On top of the harm that pesticides may inflict upon your body, the use of chemicals in farming has a tremendous effect on the environment and the ecosystem surrounding the farm. Organic farming supports the environment.
Organic farming affects the environment from many different angles. Not only, as we've been talking about, it helps nourish our bodies in a healthy way, it also nourishes the earth. And another point that is so exciting is the health and the science of soil. There's so much going on in the soil, the microbes and the mycorrhizas and fungi and all these things that are happening in the soil. And if that soil has synthetic fertilizers and herbicides and pesticides poured on it year after year, which is what happens with monocultures that are not grown organically, that soil becomes dead. And therefore you're just feeding a crop. You're not having the soil feed that crop. You're feeding the crop with artificial nutrients. And that has a whole host of problems involved. So if you are focused on growing food organically, working with Mother Nature, you're feeding the soil, you're building the topsoil, you're feeding the worms, you're doing all those things right, then the product that you're growing, whether it's a pig or corn, is healthy.
What we learned at James Ranch has taught us that eating organic is indeed good for our bodies and the environment. We want to continue to share this message and influence our community to support our bodies and our environment by eating organic and local.
At Nature's Oasis, I've kind of worked here for almost 10 years now, like all the way through college, and then I'm also a teacher, and so this is kind of my other job. And I think that they do a really good job here, as well as lots of places around town, supporting the local movement. And the reason why local movement is so important is just that we're using so many less resources to move that food to somewhere else, whereas we have wonderful resources in our area that can feed so many people here.
I think we can influence more people to eat organic by increasing supply and educating people that you get what you pay for. So although organically grown and processed products can cost more at the grocery store, when you look at all the other costs trailing behind products before they get to the supermarkets, I actually don't think it's more expensive.
We can influence people to consider buying more organic by education, and that is something that we really want to try to do better. And that's happening countrywide, nationwide actually, with a lot of films that are coming out that are educating the public, the American public, of what's been going on with their food system all these years. A lot of people are in the dark about that. So the more people understand what's really going on with their food, I think they'll be making different decisions.
When shopping, keep in mind the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. The Clean 15 are foods that are okay to buy non-organic. They are pineapples, sweet corn, grapefruit, cabbage, mangoes, asparagus, cantaloupe, papayas, onions, eggplant, avocados, cauliflower, kiwi, sweet peas, and sweet potatoes. The Dirty Dozen, however, are foods that you should definitely buy organic because they are produced with more pesticides. They are bell peppers, strawberries, cucumbers, spinach, apples, cherry tomatoes, nectarines, potatoes, peaches, celery, snap peas, and grapes. In the end, we found that eating organic is important, but the most important thing is knowing where your food is coming from and who is producing it.